On a chain of low islands off the coast of South Carolina, around 200,000 people carry a DNA culture that slavery was supposed to erase, and their DNA still proves where they came from. Inside their wooden churches, they move in a slow circle, clapping, careful never to let their feet cross, singing words that sound almost like English but are not. A religion that was supposed to be beaten out of them nearly 300 years ago by the men who held their ancestors in chains, a language no one was supposed to keep, names, foods, songs, all of it carried across an ocean in chains, and still alive on American soil 300 years later. These are the descendants of enslaved Africans who lost almost nothing. And the reason why is the part of slavery nobody ever teaches you. The proof is in their DNA. Because here is what every American gets told. When Africans were brought here in chains, they lost everything. Their language, their gods, their memory of who they were. History calls it cultural erasure. Scientists called it total, permanent, inevitable. They were wrong. One group kept nearly all of it, and not by fighting the system, because of it. These were Rice Coast Africans, and they carried the one skill the entire Low Country was built on: growing rice in tidal water. That skill made them too valuable to lose. Then malaria and yellow fever turned their islands into a death trap, and the white planters did the only thing they could. They ran. They fled the plantations every fever season and left these communities almost completely alone for generations. So the culture did not just survive, it stayed whole. And when DNA scientists finally tested them, the results pointed straight back across the Atlantic to Sierra Leone, the exact place the language had been pointing all along. By the end of this video, you will understand why the most complete African culture in America exists because of slavery, not in spite of it. For a long time, outsiders could not place it. People came to these islands, heard the locals speaking, and could not tell what they were listening to. It sounded like English. Then it did not. Words appeared that no English dictionary contained, so they called it broken. They called it backward. And they were wrong about that too. In 1949, the first professionally trained black linguist in America, a man named Lorenzo Dow Turner, published the study that ended the guessing. He had spent years on these islands with a recorder, listening, and he traced the language, word by word, to its real source. Not broken English, a full Creole, built on English, yes, but layered with the grammar, the names, and the vocabulary of more than 20 different West African languages. He could point to the exact regions. He could name the peoples it came from. The language had a memory, and that memory pointed at one place on the African coast. If you have ever sent your spit to a lab and gotten back a list of percentages you did not really understand, this is the kind of history those numbers can never tell you on their own. So take 1 second and subscribe. It costs you nothing, and it tells me to keep making these. Now back to that coast. To understand why this one community kept everything, you have to understand why they were brought here in the first place. And it was not random. Rice, that is the answer. Planters in Carolina and Georgia figured out that the swampy low country was perfect for growing rice in tidal water. There was just one problem. They had no idea how to do it. An Englishman did not know how to flood a field on the tide, drain it, and flood it again on schedule. But the people of the West African rice coast had been doing exactly that for centuries. The dikes, the gates, the flooded paddies. It was African technology, not European. So the planters went looking for it. They sent their ships to a place called Bunce Island, a British slave castle on a river in Sierra Leone. One historian calls Bunce Island the single most important historic site in Africa for the entire United States, because the people sold through its gates were not picked at random. They were picked for what they knew. Rice farmers, shipped across an ocean to build a fortune for men who could not build it themselves. And it worked. By 1708, this colony had a black majority. On the Sea Islands themselves, the enslaved population did not just match the white one, it buried it. Then came the second half of the equation, the part that makes this story so dark and so strange. The same swamps that grew the rice bred something else, mosquitoes, and with them malaria and yellow fever. The Low Country became the most lethal disease environment in early North America. For white people, living there was close to a death sentence. Planters who stayed through the summer caught fevers that killed them, but the Africans did not die at the same rate. Many of them carried something in their blood, a genetic trait, the sickle cell trait, that gives partial protection against the worst kind of malaria. They still got sick. They still died in terrible numbers. But next to Europeans, who had no protection at all, they survived where the owners could not. And the planters knew it. So every spring, when the fevers came, the white families packed up and left. They fled to the cities and the coast, and they did not come back until the cold killed the mosquitoes. Year after year, generation after generation, they abandoned the plantations and the islands into the hands of the very people they had enslaved. Sit with that for a second. The men who owned these people were too afraid of the land to live on it. So for months at a time, every single year, for the better part of 2 centuries, these communities were left almost completely alone. That is the part of this story that quietly rewires how you think about cultural survival. So if it is landing, hit the like button. It genuinely pushes this to more people who were never taught a word of it. Okay, isolation does something to a people. When no one is forcing you to assimilate, when the people in charge are not even there, you keep yourself. So they kept the language, they kept the food, rice cooked the African way, okra, gumbo, red rice, dishes you can still order on that coast today. They kept the sweetgrass baskets, coiled with a technique carried straight out of West Africa. They kept a form of worship, the ring shout, the whole community moving in a circle, careful never to cross their feet, in a pattern that traces directly back across the water. They even kept their names. And then there is the single most astonishing thing they kept, a song. Back in the 1930s, that same linguist Turner recorded a woman in coastal Georgia singing a 5-line song her family had passed down for generations. Nobody in the family knew what the words meant anymore. They only knew that you were never, ever allowed to forget it. Decades later, researchers finally cracked it. It was a funeral hymn in the Mende language of Sierra Leone. It is believed to be the longest stretch of any African language ever preserved by a black family in the United States. A family in Georgia had carried a Sierra Leonean burial song intact for more than 200 years, without understanding a single word of it. They just knew it mattered. The thread was never cut. It was only buried. For a long time, all of this lived as history and culture and oral tradition. Powerful, but the kind of thing a skeptic could wave away. Until the scientists showed up with the one thing that does not care how you feel about it. DNA. Researchers sequenced the genomes of Gullah Geechee people and lined them up against other African Americans and against populations still living in Sierra Leone today. The result was clear. Compared to other African Americans, the Gullah carried higher African ancestry, less European admixture, and a measurable genetic lean towards Sierra Leone specifically. Read that again. The biology pointed at the exact same place the language had been pointing the whole time. 2 completely separate trails, one written in words, one written in blood, both ending on the same stretch of West African coast. That is not folklore anymore. That is evidence. If you have made it this deep into a story almost nobody tells, you are exactly the kind of person I make these videos for. Subscribe so the next one actually finds you. Last piece. Because this story does not end in a lab, it ends with people going home. In 2005, a woman from Charleston named Tomalind got a letter. Not a normal letter, an invitation from the government of an entire country. Years earlier, An author digging through his own slaveholding family's records had found something extraordinary. A little girl sold off a slave ship that came from Sierra Leone in the 1750s, given the name Priscilla. And he had traced her bloodline forward, name by name, all the way down to Tomalind, alive today. Sierra Leone asked her to come home in Priscilla's place. When she landed, they received her like she was returning royalty. People wept. People called her Priscilla, as if the girl stolen nearly 250 years before had finally come back through her descendant. And she was not alone. When a president of Sierra Leone visited the Gullah community in South Carolina, he stood up and spoke to them in Creole, his own language, and the Gullah could understand him. Two peoples split by an ocean and 3 centuries of forced silence, still close enough to follow each other's words. Today, African Americans are finding that same link through DNA tests, learning their roots run straight back through Bunce Island to Sierra Leone. Some have gone and taken citizenship there. They are going home too. So here is the truth the opening promised you. The most complete African culture in America did not survive in spite of slavery. It survived because of the exact, specific, brutal shape this particular slavery took. A people valued for a single skill, dumped on islands so deadly their own owners ran from them, and left alone just long enough to stay themselves. They were never erased. They were waiting. And if one funeral song could survive 200 years inside a family that no longer spoke the language, the real question is, what is sitting inside your own DNA? The percentages you scrolled past, the regions you never looked up. The video on your screen breaks down what those ancestry results are actually telling you, and the part the testing companies never explain.